Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It is Thursday, so it's time to talk about the freight market and how it has changed week over week. And as always, we're going to start with a general overview to see what is going on in the freight market in general, what's happening with diesel prices, and then we're going to break it down by equipment type. Dry van, reefer, flatbed to see what is going on with those particular equipment types. And at the end of the video, I'm going to do a data versus experience and share my experience this week because we all know that data sometimes doesn't account for everything. Ready? Let's go! Okay, as always, all the charts are going to be attached right here, and we're starting with the general overview of the market. So first, let's talk about general volume. This is not spot market volume, right? There is a difference. The general freight volume in the market as a whole has gone down by almost 5% week over week. Now, the rejection levels, which measures the percent of rejected freight by carriers, which often ends up pushing them to the spot market, that also decreased by over 5% week over week. And currently, the percentage of loads getting rejected is about 5.35%. Now, spot volume also decreased, just like the general volume. It decreased by 11% week over week. Spot rates, however, saw an increase by an average of 3 cents per mile. Now, this is including all equipment types. And mostly this is driven by those flatbed spot rates. We will talk about it in more detail later on. All right, now let's talk about the diesel prices, focusing on this map at first. This is data from AAA. Kansas, unfortunately, I forgot to color it in, but Kansas is one of those places that is between 320 per gallon to 330 per gallon. But in general, you can see that the cheapest areas to refuel are Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Oklahoma. And the lighter it is, the cheaper it is to refuel. The most expensive places are the West Coast and the Northeast. So that's just a map for you to figure out where you're going, what are the diesel prices like there. But what is happening with diesel prices in general? Well, today the average is around $3.56 or 57 cents per gallon. Now, this is a decrease by almost 2 cents per gallon from last week, which is good. It's definitely a decrease month over month by almost 3 cents per gallon. And it's a decrease by 46 cents per gallon year over year. So yeah, diesel prices, they are going down, but still remember the map because certain areas are definitely much cheaper than others. Okay, now let's talk about what's happening with capacity. I don't have any good news for you here. The white line is as close to zero as I could get it. It's actually 0.89, which signifies no change in capacity. But since around the end of February, we have seen consistently that there is a positive net change in capacity in the number of MC numbers. And this week, as of Friday, the MC numbers increased net by 181 carriers. All right, so now let's move on to dry van specific data. This data is from FTR Intel, and as you can see, everything is red, which yeah, not the best sign. So the rate per mile for dry vans for all loads on the spot market decreased on average by about 2 cents per mile, bringing dry vans to an average of $1.80 per mile. Now, these rates are about 3% lower than this time last year. Volumes decreased by almost 7% for dry vans week over week and are 17% lower than this time last year. So now let's break it down by loads capacity and load to truck ratios. So the darker an area is, the more loads come out of that area for dry vans in the spot market. And as you can see, the top three with over 1,000 loads are California, Texas, and Georgia. The Northeast, as well as the Northern Plain states or Rockies, they don't have much loads there for dry vans. But in general, it's really the Midwest and Southeast that has more loads. Now let's take a look at what capacity is doing. Obviously, over 2,000 trucks in Texas, California, Florida are also between 1,000 to 2,000 trucks. And this is of course estimated, but most of the trucks do tend to hang out If we take a look at regions, they tend to hang out in the Midwest and the Southeast where the loads are. So now the question is load to truck ratios. Anything that is burgundy red, those are overcapacity states. So there's less than one load per truck in the whole state. If we take all the loads in that state and all the trucks in that state, doesn't mean that you're not going to find certain areas within the state where you might get more negotiating power. But this is a generalized view. Anything that is orange is equilibrium. There's between 1 to 2 loads per truck. And anything green, which is Louisiana, South Carolina, and Vermont, there are 2 to 3 loads per truck. There is under capacity. Okay, now let's do the same thing for reefers. And reefers on the spot market, everything is green, which is a good sign. The question is, does data match the experience? But let's talk about the data. So week over week, we saw a 7 cent per mile increase for reefers. And this is for all loads, short hauls, long hauls, it's all averaged out. Now rates year over year are about 2% higher than this time last year. Volumes increased by 3.6% on the spot market for reefers week over week, and they are 9% higher than this time last year. So let's take a look at our maps. So as you can see, Texas and California is where there are over 1,000 loads. And then, it's kind of hard to tell. You can see that the plain states, as well as Kentucky, West Virginia, a lot of the Northeast, this is where there are not a lot of loads. But if we look just in general, we can see that, again, it's the Midwest, which has, and maybe some of the East Coast that has more loads. Let's take a look at capacity. Capacity tends to stick to where the loads are, Midwest, South, California as well. But the important one is the load to truck ratio, of course. So again, anything burgundy red is overcapacity, less than a load per truck. Anything orange is equilibrium, 1 to 2 loads per truck. And anything green is under capacity, which is actually 2 to 5 loads per truck. And those areas are Idaho, South Dakota, Mississippi, Delaware, and New Jersey. Okay, finally, last but not least, the equipment type that is driving that general spot rate per mile up is the flatbed. Flatbed saw another increase by 5 cents per mile, bringing it to $2.60 per mile. Whether that is true or not, I'll tell you in the data versus experience, or what my experience was. Now, rate year over year is 2% higher than this time last year. However, volumes did drop for flatbeds by 15%. This is something, again, I can confirm, and we'll talk about it later. Now, volumes year over year are about 13% higher than this time last year. So let's take a look at the maps. So in terms of the flatbed loads, most loads are in the South, in the Midwest, not as many on the western portion of the US. Trucks, they tend to, again, just like for reefers and dry vans, they do tend to stick to where the loads are. Most of the trucks are actually in Texas and Florida. Texas and Florida are those two places where there are constantly loads going there, right? So you are going to see more capacity there. But what is happening with the load to truck ratio? Well, this is happening. As you can see, most of the map is over capacity. It's burgundy red. I can confirm this. In terms of equilibrium, it's only Oregon, Arizona, Georgia, South Carolina, Maryland, and Maine. These are places where there is about 1 to 2 loads per truck. And under capacity, which is 2 to 14 loads per truck, exists in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. So now let's talk about data versus experience, because it's very important to understand that data doesn't always take into consideration everything. So I'm going to be speaking from the standpoint of a flatbed carrier because this is what I am. I don't operate reefers or dry vans at the moment. And if you look at the data, especially the numbers on the spot market, you think that flatbed is the place to be. These carriers are making bank. But that is not what my experience has shown at all. The reason the general spot rate is getting better for flatbeds is because a handful of areas are getting better, particularly in the South. The Midwest, which I relied on for the past month, has actually died. I was shocked to see how few loads there are from places like eastern Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, there is only a fraction of the loads that I saw about a week or two ago. But the South, yeah, there are a ton of loads to choose from because we did end up in the South with one truck this week, and definitely much easier to book loads there. Now, this week has definitely been a challenge for us, mostly because of the volume in the Midwest. And while we were eventually able to book a decent rate per mile, it took on average 4 hours to book a decent load because most of that time you're just waiting for that one load to come out that is unlike any other. And actually, I have to say that the load to truck ratio map for flatbeds, because this is the one I can definitely confirm, it summarizes the situation pretty nicely. Everywhere where it's red, it's very difficult to quickly book a load. You can still book loads there for decent rates, but it will take you time. But the South, yeah, it's relatively easier there. But the issue is that the region where it is easier to make money is microscopic. What about you guys? How has this week been treating you? Have you found areas which pay well? Are you able to stick to those areas? Curious to hear your thoughts. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.